In 1999, The Mummy took audiences on a mystical adventure where death could be defeated and mummies could rise again. But in real life, not everyone was as fortunate as on screen. By 2025, some cast members had passed away in tragedy. Some died on their very birthdays, some quietly disappeared without anyone noticing, while others became billionaires. You won't believe what happened after the spotlight faded. Let's explore it together. Rachel Weisz as Evelyn Carnahan. Rachel Weisz was born on March 7, 1970, in London, England. At the age of 29, she portrayed Evelyn Carnahan in The Mummy, 1999, a brilliant, shy, yet resilient librarian who used knowledge to confront ancient darkness. The role allowed Weisz to enter Hollywood through intelligence and depth rather than familiar glamorous cliches. In contrast to that character, Weisz's childhood was overshadowed by early loss. Her father died when she was very young, leaving a lasting emotional void. From then on, she grew up feeling she had to be strong, control her emotions, and never allow herself to appear weak. This foundation made Weisz acutely sensitive to loneliness and pressure, even as she outwardly projected calm intellect and composure. As her career advanced, pressure took on a new form. Weisz had to constantly confront gender bias, where women were judged more for their appearance than their ability. A relentless shooting schedule between independent films and blockbusters pushed her into prolonged mental strain, forcing her to turn down many major opportunities. During this period, she searched for inner balance while delivering a powerful performance in The Constant Gardener, a role that also demanded immense emotional expenditure. By 2025, at the age of 55, Rachel Weisz chose to slow down, focusing on family and projects that truly mattered to her. Her marriage to Daniel Craig provided a sense of stability she had rarely known before. With an estimated net worth of around $40 million, Weisz chose her roles, chose her pace of life, and chose not to let the fractures of her past continue to bring her down. Fraser as Rick O'Connell. Fraser was born on December 3, 1968, in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. At 30 years old, he took on the role of Rick O'Connell, a daring, humorous adventurer who threw himself into danger as if he knew no fear, in The Mummy, 1999. That role turned Fraser into a global action hero almost overnight, but it also opened the door to a long chain of personal tragedies behind the scenes. He grew up in a family that moved frequently, lacking a sense of stability and long-term attachment. Early loneliness taught Fraser to endure in silence, pouring all his energy into proving his worth. When he entered Hollywood with Encino Man and George of the Jungle, he carried a deep desire to be loved, but also unknowingly placed his body into the dangerous grind of physically punishing roles. The years following The Mummy became a period in which Fraser paid with his own body. Performing his own stunts forced him to undergo multiple surgeries on his spine, knees, and vocal cords, with pain compounding over time. Alongside this came a devastating psychological blow in 2003 when he was sexually assaulted by a Hollywood executive, an emotional wound that led him into severe depression and gradually pushed him out of the industry. By 2025, at the age of 57, Fraser had survived everything that once nearly crushed him. His Oscar win for The Whale was not only an artistic triumph, but felt like a long-overdue apology from Hollywood to a man who had once been abandoned. With an estimated net worth of around $25 million, Fraser no longer chases glory, choosing instead slower, more humane roles. Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep. Arnold Vosloo was born on June 16, 1962, in Pretoria, South Africa. He was 37 years old when he transformed into Imhotep in The Mummy, 1999. The cursed high priest, whose face carried betrayed love and an obsession that could not be released. The role brought Vosloo into international prominence, but also bound him tightly to the image of a dark villain. Vosloo grew up in an artistic family, yet his childhood was not defined solely by stage lights. The backdrop of apartheid-era South Africa cast instability and division over his youth. Mandatory military service ended early due to health issues, making Vosloo confront the fragility of the body and fate at a young age. Although he won numerous stage awards at home, he lived with constant anxiety about survival. After immigrating to the United States, Vosloo had to begin again almost from nothing. His accent, background, and a face considered non-standard Hollywood led to repeated typecasting as antagonists, from Hard Target to The Mummy. The success of Imhotep brought recognition, but also made it difficult for him to escape the shadow of evil. In his early years in Hollywood, Vosloo endured severe financial pressure, accepting repetitive roles simply to survive. By 2025, at the age of 63, Arnold Vosloo lives more quietly after decades of facing the industry's unforgiving gaze. He continues to act, and his estimated net worth of around $2 million stands as the trace of a career sustained by patience and endurance rather than spectacle. John Hannah as Jonathan Carnahan. John Hannah was born on April 23, 1962, in East Kilbride, Scotland. In 1999, at 37 years old, he played Jonathan Carnahan, the sly, greedy, yet charming older brother who always used humor to mask fear and insecurity in The Mummy. The character became an indispensable comic element of the film and firmly associated Hannah's name with the image of a survivor by wit and tricks. In real life, John Hannah's childhood was not supported by safety or privilege. Growing up in a working-class family, with a mother who worked as a cleaner and a father who was a mechanic, he became familiar early on with scarcity and the need to fend for himself. As a teenager, Hannah did not dare to imagine art as a viable path in life. He chose to train as an electrician, enduring 4 exhausting years of apprenticeship, doing manual labor day after day, while his dream of the stage was tightly suppressed. That period planted in him a lasting fear of failure. When he turned to acting and unexpectedly gained attention with 4 weddings and a funeral, Hannah seemed to have escaped the cycle. But that success created another trap. He was typecast into intelligent but secondary comic roles. Although he went on to appear in Sliding Doors and later revealed a darker, more brutal side in Spartacus, Hannah's career was repeatedly interrupted by lost roles, replaced projects, and the persistent feeling that he constantly had to prove he was worth more than a funny supporting part. That pressure quietly wore down his mental resilience over many years. By 2025, at the age of 63, John Hannah chose a quieter path. Selective acting, narration, voice work, and a life removed from the industry's relentless competition. His stable marriage to Joanna Roth became an anchor that kept him from being overwhelmed by professional self-doubt. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, his fortune is not a symbol of glamour, but a reward for the persistence of someone who often stood at the margins, yet never gave up. Oded Fehr as Ardeth Bey. Oded Fehr was born on November 23, 1970, in Tel Aviv, Israel. In 1999, at 28 years old, he appeared in The Mummy as Ardeth Bey, the silent, loyal leader of the Medjai, carrying the responsibility of protecting humanity from an ancient curse. With few lines but commanding presence, Ardeth Bey made Fehr an unforgettable figure even without being at the center of the story. In real life, Oded Fehr's childhood was shaped by early discipline and tension. Growing up in an intellectual family, he was drawn into national duty early on, serving in the Israeli Navy from his late teens. The harsh years of military service forged his toughness, but also left psychological traces of someone accustomed to living in a constant state of alertness. Later, while working as a security officer for El Al Airlines, Fehr lived under the pressure of protecting others' lives, while still feeling uncertain about his own future path. When he turned to acting, studied in Europe, and then entered Hollywood, Fehr faced a different kind of isolation. His Middle Eastern background often cast him as an outsider, limiting him to mysterious, dangerous, or military roles. Although The Mummy opened a major door, the road afterward remained uneven, filled with villain roles or supporting characters, from Resident Evil to long-running television series. Perseverance allowed him to endure. By 2025, at the age of 55, Oded Fehr continues to work steadily, particularly in television and voice acting. Family has become the place where he finds the peace his youth never had. His estimated net worth of around $3 million does not come from dazzling fame, but from the persistence of an actor who has always stood firm in the shadows. Stephen Dunham as Henderson. Stephen Dunham was born on September 14, 1964 in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. In 1999, at 35 years old, he appeared in The Mummy as Henderson, a young, humorous American officer who carried a spirit of adventure but was also deeply vulnerable. The role helped audiences remember Dunham's face, even though he always stood at the edge of the spotlight. Behind that role, however, Dunham's youth unfolded amid constant movement and instability when his family relocated from Boston to New Hampshire. He quickly learned what it meant to prove himself, pursuing acting while opportunities arrived slowly and inconsistently. In his early years, Dunham frequently failed auditions and had to accept small roles and guest appearances just to survive. That prolonged waiting created a quiet, lingering pressure. After The Mummy, Dunham's career continued to rise and fall unpredictably. He was well-liked in DAG and appeared steadily on television, but was rarely entrusted with leading roles. Despite efforts to shift directions through theater, sitcoms, and film, Dunham remained caught in the orbit of charming supporting characters. Professional pressure was partly offset by his happy marriage to Alexandra Lee, which helped him maintain emotional balance through repeated disappointments. Tragedy came suddenly. On September 14, 2012, his 48th birthday, Stephen Dunham died of a heart attack in Burbank, California. His sudden passing shocked family and colleagues. Paranormal Activity 4, the final film he appeared in alongside his wife, dedicated its closing credits to him. His net worth of approximately $1 million at the time of his death does not reflect a lifetime of effort, but it speaks to a sincere, resilient career that ended far too soon. Patricia Velasquez as Anksu Namun. Patricia Velasquez was born on January 31, 1971, in Zulia, Venezuela. At 28 years old, she played Anksu Namun in The Mummy, 1999, the tragic lover of Imhotep, a symbol of desire, betrayal, and the cost of blind love. Her powerful beauty made the character both seductive and haunting, but also tied Velasquez to the femme fatale image for many years. Behind the role, Velasquez's childhood was far from as glamorous as the runways she later walked. Born into a large family with indigenous Weisz heritage, she grew up amid poverty and a sense of being marginalized. Leaving her homeland at a young age to pursue modeling placed her in a state of displacement and pain, especially as she watched her community remain forgotten. Those fractures quietly followed her into adulthood. When she transitioned into acting, Velasquez faced another challenge, being typecast by her appearance. After The Mummy, she was repeatedly offered visually striking but shallow roles, narrowing her acting career. Alongside professional pressure came an internal struggle with gender identity, fear of public judgment, and an increasing sense of responsibility toward humanitarian work. She appeared in projects such as Arrested Development and The L Word while quietly building the Weisz Taya Foundation. By 2025, at the age of 54, Patricia Velasquez lives between two worlds, cinema and social activism. Her estimated net worth of around $3 million reflects an unconventional path shaped as much by purpose as by performance. Aharon Ipalé as Pharaoh Seti Warsh. Aharon Ipalé was born on December 27, 1941, in Morocco. At 58 years old, he portrayed Pharaoh Seti Warsh in The Mummy, 1999, the stern, imposing ancient Egyptian king who bore the weight of power and destiny. Though his screen time was brief, his presence added historical depth to the story. To reach this role, Ipalé's childhood was shaped by migration and adaptation. At just 2 years old, he moved with his family from Morocco to Israel, growing up in a society still forming its identity. Military service instilled discipline, but also reinforced a constant need to prove himself. Later, he traveled to London to study theater, entering a world where language and culture became significant barriers. Ipalé's career spanned decades and countries, yet it was never easy. He gained attention from major projects and appeared regularly on American television, but significant setbacks, such as the failure of Ishtar, left lasting professional scars. Still, he persisted, working on projects from The Prince of Egypt to Star Trek, The Next Generation, before returning strongly with the role of Pharaoh in The Mummy. In his later years, he returned to Israel but could not recreate his earlier prominence, living quietly while confronting illness. Ultimately, Aharon Ipalé passed away on June 27, 2016, at the age of 74, from cancer, after several months of treatment at Sheba Medical Center in Israel. He was laid to rest in Holon, closing the journey of an actor who traveled between cultures throughout his life. His net worth of approximately $1 million at the time of his death stands as a modest marker of a long, persistent acting career. Jonathan Hyde as Dr. Alan Chamberlain. Jonathan Hyde was born on May 21, 1948 in Brisbane, Australia. In 1999, at 51 years old, he played Dr. Alan Chamberlain in The Mummy, an arrogant, ambitious Egyptologist who believed knowledge could control everything. This role continued a series of powerful, cold characters Hyde portrayed throughout the 1990s. Behind the role, Hyde's youth was shaped by a high-pressure change in direction. He initially studied law, carrying the expectations of a middle-class family, before deciding to abandon that path to pursue the arts. His move to London in 1969 was a gamble, leaving home, leaving familiarity, and accepting the need to start over. The rigorous training years at RADA and the Royal Shakespeare Company forged his technical precision, but demanded a heavy psychological price in independence and ego. When he transitioned into film, Hyde had to balance the tension between classical theater and commercial Hollywood. He appeared consecutively in Jumanji and Titanic, followed by The Mummy, yet each step forward came with the fear of losing his theatrical identity. Though highly respected in stage circles, Hyde lived a life of constant movement, between disciplined rehearsals and punishing filming schedules. By 2025, at the age of 77, Jonathan Hyde continues to work selectively, returning to the stage as a spiritual refuge after decades of relentless effort. His long-standing marriage to Isabel Buchanan has been the anchor that keeps his life steady. With a net worth of approximately $7 million, Hyde's career reflects a long, enduring journey that allowed him to stand firmly on his own terms throughout his life. Bernard Fox as Winston Havelock. Bernard Fox was born on May 11, 1927, in Port Talbot, Wales. In 1999, at 72 years old, he appeared in The Mummy as Winston Havelock, a former elderly Royal Air Force pilot, humorous and nostalgic, carrying the spirit of a generation that had lived through war. His screen time was brief, yet his presence left a warm afterglow, like a living memory of classic cinema. To reach this role, Fox's childhood was one that pushed him to mature early. Born into a family with 5 generations in the performing arts, he stepped onto the stage as a child, growing up behind the curtains and on touring roads. However, his youth was far from gentle. World War II and the Korean War forced him into service with the Royal Navy, pulling him away from the spotlight to confront harsh reality. Those wartime years forged discipline, but also left behind a lingering sense of loss and fatigue. Fox's career, spanning more than half a century, was a journey of quiet persistence. He became a familiar face on American television through Bewitched and Hogan's Heroes, yet as he grew older, roles became fewer, gradually giving way to younger generations. Even so, Fox continued, from charming comedic parts to a memorable appearance in Titanic, 1997. Sadly, on December 14, 2016, Bernard Fox passed away from heart failure in Van Nuys, California, at the age of 89. He left behind a marriage that had lasted more than half a century with Jacqueline Fox, 2 daughters, and a gentle legacy. His net worth of approximately $2 million at the time of his death is measured not by fame, but by the longevity of an actor who remained devoted to his craft until the very end. Kevin J. O'Connor as Benny Gabor. Kevin J. O'Connor was born on November 15, 1963, in Chicago, Illinois, USA. In 1999, at 36 years old, he transformed into Benny Gabor in The Mummy, a survivor driven by cunning, cowardly, yet utterly unforgettable. The role brought laughter while also cementing the image of an eccentric oddball that followed him for many years afterward. To reach this role, O'Connor's childhood unfolded within the strict framework of a working-class family. His father was a police officer, his mother a teacher. Catholic school, rigid discipline, and evenings spent watching old films on television nurtured his imagination, but also planted a deep sense of alienation. When he stepped onto the stage as a teenager, he quickly realized he was suited to roles that were unlike anyone else, and that realization became both his salvation and his burden. O'Connor's career flourished but was never comfortable. From Lord of Illusions to The Mummy, then Van Helsing, he was repeatedly cast in strange, unsettling supporting roles, rarely placed at the center. Even though he left a haunting impression in There Will Be Blood, 2007, with a small but unforgettable performance, the label of typecasting clung to him, limiting opportunities for leading roles. That professional pressure led O'Connor to choose a path of quiet persistence, working steadily rather than chasing the spotlight. By 2025, at the age of 62, Kevin J. O'Connor continues to act selectively, living a private life after a long marriage. His net worth of around $1 million reflects a career forever linked to a character audiences will never forget. Corey Johnson as Daniels. Corey Johnson was born on May 17, 1961, in New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. In 1999, at 38 years old, he appeared in The Mummy as Daniels, a reckless, greedy American gravedigger who quickly pays the price for his choices. The role was brief but intense, and it closely mirrored the trajectory of Johnson's career. Behind the screen, Johnson's childhood unfolded in a large family, where competition and self-reliance were unavoidable. Growing up in the southern United States, he learned early what it meant to carve out a place for himself without any built-in support. When he moved to the UK to study and work, Johnson faced a different kind of displacement. Being far from home, working with a voice and physical presence that did not quite belong to the place where he stood. In his early years, he was repeatedly cast in small roles, soldiers, violent men, expendable characters, as if he were only suited to people destined to be sacrificed. As a result, Johnson's career carried a constant, silent tension. He appeared in major blockbusters such as Saving Private Ryan, The Bourne Ultimatum, and Captain Phillips, yet his name was rarely remembered. Alongside film, theater became the place where he found genuine recognition, from Frost, Nixon, to a streetcar named Desire. The breakdown of his marriage after many years together pushed Johnson further inward, leading him to pour his energy into work as the only way to endure. By 2025, at the age of 64, Corey Johnson lives quietly in the UK, continuing to work between stage and screen on carefully chosen projects. His net worth of approximately $700,000 reflects the full journey he has traveled. A performer who has always stood behind the biggest scenes, carrying the fatigue of an international working actor who never gave up. Erick Avari as Dr. Terence Bey. Erick Avari was born on April 13, 1952, in Darjeeling, India. At 47 years old, he appeared in The Mummy, 1999, as Dr. Terence Bey, a knowledgeable, cautious local scholar standing between knowledge and danger. The role extended Avari's familiar screen image in adventure and science fiction works. Behind this success, Avari's childhood was shaped by cinematic heritage but also deep contradictions. Born into a Parsi Zoroastrian family, with a father who managed a movie theater, he developed an early love for the arts, yet education and migration forced him into a fractured sense of identity. Moving from India to the United States to study and work in theater, he carried with him his accent, appearance, and history. Avari's career is extensive yet constrained by prejudice. With more than 100 roles, he has portrayed representatives of over 24 ethnicities, from Stargate to Independence Day, and later Heroes. A heavy workload did not mean ease. Avari was often cast as the outsider, the native intellectual, or the antagonist, rarely entrusted with the central role. Physical and mental strain accumulated over the years, gradually pushing him to step back as his health no longer allowed the same pace. By 2025, at the age of 73, Erick Avari lives semi-retired, accepting only projects that truly matter to him, such as The Chosen. His net worth of approximately $4 million is the result of a long, resilient journey. Omid Djalili as Warden God Hassan. Omid Djalili was born on September 30, 1965, in London, England. At 34 years old, he appeared in The Mummy, 1999, as Warden God Hassan, a greedy, slippery prison warden steeped in satire. This supporting role was only a small piece of his extensive yet deeply conflicted film career. In contrast to that character, Djalili's childhood was marked by rejection and doubt. The son of Iranian Baha'i immigrants, he grew up with a persistent sense of not fully belonging anywhere. Failing his A-levels multiple times and being rejected by numerous drama schools forced him onto a difficult detour, even leading him to falsify academic records just to continue his education. Those early failures forged his distinctive self-deprecating comedic voice. When he entered international cinema, Djalili faced new prejudices in the post-9/11 era. He was repeatedly cast in vague Middle Eastern roles, from Gladiator to Pirates of the Caribbean, which provided steady work but reinforced typecasting. That pressure pushed him back toward stand-up comedy, where he could speak openly about war, religion, and identity. By 2025, at the age of 60, Omid Djalili remains highly active in comedy, film, and voice acting, while also publicly advocating for Iranian women's rights. His net worth of around $5 million is the result of a difficult path, transforming pain into laughter and using laughter to say what others avoid. Tuc Watkins as Burns. Tuc Watkins was born on September 2, 1966, in Kansas City, Missouri, USA. In 1999, at 33 years old, he appeared in The Mummy as Burns, a nearsighted, clumsy archaeologist and one of the first characters to pay the price for greed at Hamunaptra. The role was small but memorable, capturing Watkins's distinct blend of tragic comedy amid a cast dominated by action-driven heroes. Behind the role, Watkins's childhood and early adulthood were shaped by the constant need to hide his true self. Growing up in the American Midwest and studying communications and theater, he quickly understood that his sexual identity was not something safe to reveal in a conservative environment. When he entered television through One Life to Live, Watkins used humor and cleverness as a protective shell, crafting an image of a charming, sharp-witted man. His career advanced steadily but under invisible pressure. Despite being well-loved on One Life to Live and later Desperate Housewives, Watkins lived with the fear of losing roles if the truth became public. In 2013, when he came out as gay, It was not a moment of complete liberation, but a professional gamble. Some doors closed, role offers declined, and at the same time, the responsibility of being a single father to twin children born in 2012 placed an even heavier emotional burden on him. He had to learn how to remain steady under Hollywood's scrutiny while raising his children alone. By 2025, at the age of 59, Tuc Watkins is living more authentically than ever before. A stable relationship with Andrew Rannells, candid roles in The Boys in the Band, Uncoupled, and on the Broadway stage have helped him reclaim his artistic voice. His estimated net worth of around $3 million represents the cost of a long journey, trading safety for the freedom to live truthfully, to be a father, an artist, and no longer run from himself. More than 2 decades have passed, and the faces that once brought Hamunaptra to life on screen have since followed very different paths. Some returning in renewed brilliance, some quietly fading away, and others gone forever in silence, leaving fans deeply moved. In your opinion, which loss among the Mummy cast has haunted you the most? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue exploring the tragic then and now stories and the truths hidden behind Hollywood's glow.